Hello, Liverpool fans. Welcome back to the Liverpool Reaction, an American LFC podcast. Coach Ralph and I are very excited to bring you this podcast. From games to players to club news, we cover everything LFC. You can find us on every platform, and we are even on YouTube. Please take the time to follow the podcast. That way you are aware every time a new podcast is up. Thank you for listening. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Liverpool Reaction, an American LFC podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Salim, and I'm with my co-host, Coach Ralph. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Salim. Looking forward to recording another episode here.
Yeah, we have a unique one this week. We have separated the Liverpool eras by the Premier League era and Premier League era. So because Coach has a lot more experience in the older teams, that sounds bad, Coach, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think you're being polite, Salim. You're just telling me that I'm old, so okay.
And I'm taking from 1992 on. Essentially what we're doing here, folks, is we are picking the best 11. I also picked a bench, and I picked a coach as well. But it's essentially what we're doing is we are selecting the best 11 from those two eras. And Coach, because your era comes before the Premier League, you want to start it off?
Certainly. I mean, I can do that. I mean, I have a little bit of history myself with this because I think it was back in 2001. It was right around there that I was back in England watching a couple of games, and I was actually featured in a Liverpool program picking my all-time team. And so, yeah, I think it was around 2001, as I say. So it was primarily players from the pre-Premier League era, and that's pretty much the team that I'm going to be presenting to you tonight. So I can do it by position, and I'm guessing that's what you want me to do?
Yeah, you can start, from the goalkeeper forward. You can move forwards back to the goalkeeper, however you want.
Well, why don't we do it like this? Why don't we do defense, which is goalkeepers and defense? I'll do mine, you do yours, and then we work our way through midfield, forwards, and substitutes, perhaps.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So starting off in goal, one thing that's very interesting is, for me, you're talking about a period, 1963, basically 30 years from 1963 onwards. And in that time, Liverpool only really had three goalkeepers, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah.
First of all, there was Tommy Lawrence. There was Tommy Lawrence, who was in the 60s. And Tommy, affectionately known as the Flying Pig because of his build. He's quite a chunky guy. And he was one of the first goalkeepers, actually, that would come out of his area to play a little bit, mainly to boot the ball. I don't think he tried to play like they do now and everything, but he would come way out of his area to clear the ball. And he was a good goalkeeper. He was a Scottish international. And in the 70s, Ray Clemence took over from him. And Clemence, in terms of his build, was very different to Tommy Lawrence. He was a very slim, lithe goalkeeper. And Clemence stayed with the team for just over 10 years. And when we went into the 80s, he decided he wanted a new challenge and he wanted to leave Liverpool. So he moved down south to Tottenham Hotspur. And his place was taken over by Bruce Grobbelaar, who was a total unknown. He was from Zimbabwe. He played a little bit over here, actually, in the NSL. And I think he'd come over and played with Crewe Alexandra in the 4th Division. And it took Grobbelaar maybe a season or so to settle because he was a fantastic athlete. And he was eccentric, is how I would put it. He was very eccentric. I'm sure you know some of the history through to the Champions League and the wobbly legs and celebrating trophies by doing the lap of honor on his hands and all this kind of stuff. He was different. But from this era, I think Ray Clemence, undoubtedly, I would say even through to the current era. Alisson Becker's a great goalkeeper, but I think Ray Clemence is the best that Liverpool in my lifetime have ever had. He was fantastic. He was very athletic, as I say, very live, good hands. And in those days, they didn't play with goalkeeper gloves, by the way.
Right.
They didn't have goalkeeper gloves. And he was just a great goalkeeper. His biggest asset was his concentration. And his competition at the time was Peter Shilton, who played for various teams in the First Division. And for a long, long time, they shared the England berth. Clemence would play sometimes, Shilton would play sometimes. And Shilton was a fantastic goalkeeper, but the one area that I think Clemence had over Peter Shilton was his concentration, because so many games that he played in, it would be the ball would be down the other end. Liverpool would be attacking, Liverpool would be pressing, and he wasn't involved in the game. And then all of a sudden, the other team would attack, they would counter, whatever, and he was called into action. So he had to have very, very good concentration, and he did. He was just a great goalkeeper. So Clemence is my choice in goal. And I picked a 4-4-2, which is kind of the older traditional formation. What I've done is there are a couple of players that I've played in a different position than perhaps they played for Liverpool, and it's purely because they were so good. And for right full back, there were three players that I considered for the position. One was Phil Neal, who was an England international, and I think he holds the record for any player, not just a Liverpool player, for the amount of trophies he won.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very good fullback, scored a lot of vital goals from the penalty spot, and as I say, played for his country. Then there was Chris Lawler, a very, very underrated fullback. He played in the 60s into the early 70s. And he did get some games with England, not too many, but he was very good. And what he was great at, I think he scored around 50 goals for Liverpool, but never from a penalty. So he was effective at the back, but he was one of these players that would come in at the back post and he would pinch goals. There was a very famous derby game where Liverpool were in transition at the time. Shankly was changing the team from the 60s to the 70s. And they played Everton at Anfield, and Everton were the defending champions at the time. And deep into the second half, they were winning 2-0. And Steve Highway, which is a name that I will come back to later, got involved in the game, scored a goal, set up a goal for John Toshak, and then there was another attack where he crossed it. Toshak flicked the ball on. Chris Lawler arrived at the back post to score. Very famous goal for Reds fans from my era. So I hadn't picked him either. So there was two great choices who were out-and-out right-backs, but what I've done is I've moved a central defender, Mark Lawrenson, to right-back.
Okay.
And Lawrenson was just a fantastic defender. And prior to playing for Liverpool, I can remember he came to Anfield with Brighton, and he was outstanding at the back. Very, very fast, good on the ball. And actually, I think that in the modern game, I could almost see him being used as a wing-back because of his ability to get forward. As I say, he had speed, good on the ball, and he is my right-back. On the other side of the field, I have somebody that has very strong connections to Boston and to New England. And that's the Scottish international, Steve Nichol.
Yeah.
And Steve Nichol, for many years, was manager of the New England Revolution. Tremendous player. And another fullback that was very, very capable of getting forward, supporting the attack. I believe in one game against Newcastle United away, he even scored a hat-trick.
Wow.
So he was a great player. And he could play on either side, but I think they played him a lot on the left. And actually, he's a Scot, and in the middle I have two more Scots. Ron Yates, who was centre-half during the 60s, really big guy, dominating at the back, great in the air. And sometimes he would get the ball and come out of the back and he'd beat a few players and the crowd would get excited. But that wasn't his game. He was just a dominant defender, kind of a pre-forerunner of Sami Hyypiä, who came in the Premier League era.
Mm-hmm.
And Yates, great in the air, great leader. He was captain of the team and just a very dominating figure. And alongside him, another Scottish player, Alan Hansen. And Hansen was kind of the closest in my lifetime that's out of the British Isles. We've had a player that kind of compares to Franz Beckenbauer.
Oh, wow.
He would get the ball at the back. He was very silky smooth when he had the ball. He would just kind of glide out of defense. He would distribute. Very, very classy player. And I think that he would be kind of a good complement to Ron Yates, who was kind of big, dominating, physical. And then you have beside him Alan Hansen, who, as I say, was very silky smooth, good on the ball. And he would just edge out Emlyn Hughes, who was another player from the late 60s into the 70s, who had the nickname of Crazy Horse, and Crazy Horse was kind of Mr. Enthusiastic. He was dominating at the back. He could get forward. He scored a lot of goals from distance. He was one of these players that could strike the ball from 30 yards. But I would just give Hansen the edge over Emlyn Hughes. So my defence on the pre-Premier League team, Clemence, Lawrenson, Yeats, Hansen, and Nichol.
Okay. So with mine, I struggled with trying to not have recency bias. And however, on the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of hard because Liverpool in the Premier League era hasn't been known to have like these stonewall, incredible defenses. But I think I have to start with Alisson as the goalkeeper. When I looked back at some of the other goalkeepers, I looked at Pepe Reina, Jerzy Dudek, Simon Mignolet, and none of them really can compete with Alisson in goal in the Premier League era. He's known as one of the best in the world. He's extremely big. We know all his attributes, and even the attributes that aren't too desirable. Sometimes he plays with the ball a little too much, but that's maybe the Brazilian in him. The back four, I went 4-3-3, and the back four, I struggled with even people that were on the wings that were better than Robertson and Trent. Finnegan, is it Finnegan? Finnan? Steve Finnan?
Steve Finnan.
Yeah, so he was one that came to mind, but I thought, again, not as good as these guys. And so I landed on Trent and Robertson. I know this sounds pretty chalk, but it gets interesting. And then from a central defender, I have two of them, obviously. I mean, Virgil he's one of the best in the world, and on his day, with his speed, with his size, with how calm he is when people are coming at him, he's a leader. I couldn't displace him. And the second central defender, this is where I kind of was stuck between two players. One you mentioned, Sami Hyypiä, and the other was Jamie Carragher. And if you look at my piece of paper here, Coach, I got him scratched out multiple times. I went back and forth multiple times. And I finally landed on Jamie Carragher. And Jamie Carragher was through and through red. Maybe not the most composed on the ball, maybe not the most skilled, but the heart, determination, body on the line kind of defender that you knew was going to show up. And I couldn't stray away from that kind of heart and desire that kind of embodies the Liverpool Football Club. So my back four and my goalie, Alisson, Trent, Virgil, Jamie Carragher, Andy Robertson.
Okay, so repeat that again. You had Robertson, you had Trent,
Virgil, and Carragher.
And Carragher.
And just to kind of the one defender that I also struggled with maybe getting in was John Arnerise. I mean, left foot from the heavens, thunderbolt, kind of like Szoboszlai's right foot. I mean, this guy's left foot was a cannon. But I think he's one that I just kind of put on the bench, and I thought he'd be a great guy to sub in for Robertson. Robertson just flies up and down the wing. He's never tired. He's rarely injured. He's always there. I mean, the last couple of years he's picked up a couple nicks here and there, but that's because he's been playing high octane football for 6-7 years. Like, it's going to happen. You're going to pick up injuries when you play Klopp style and you play a lot of games and you get deep into a lot of tournaments. So that's why I kind of went Robertson over John Arnerise.
Okay. Well, look, obviously it's not my job to pick the team, but over the years, from time to time, being a fan and a diehard fan, I pick my teams for all eras and the Premier League era. So just for interest's sake, let me tell you who I would pick in the Premier League era.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would give the goalkeeper to Alisson, just over Rainier, although I thought Rainier was very good as well. Right fullback is interesting. I think Trent would be in contention, but two other fullbacks that I considered. One was Rob Jones, who was from the 90s, who was very, very talented fullback, but sadly was really plagued with serious injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he would have been more of a legend if he hadn't have been injured so much. He just had tremendous talent, fast, good on the ball. Another one that came to mind, and he only really played one season, and that was Marcus Babbel, the German international.
Mm-hmm.
Who unfortunately got some kind of illness, and that kind of ended his career at Anfield. For me, the two best central defenders would be Hiffier and Van Dijk.
Yeah.
But other players that I would consider would be Daniel Agger, who was kind of a latter-day Alan Hansen, very classy, smooth on the ball.
Left foot, yeah.
Yep. And then there was Mark Wright, who again was from the 90s, England international, a good dominating centre-half. And then the left back, I would put Andy Robertson. I think he's the best left back that Liverpool have ever had in my time.
Yeah.
Because he was great in attack, he was a good defender, and he was just perpetual motion. And I would just edge him over the player that you mentioned, which was John Arnerise.
Yeah. I had a hard time with right back. I was just like poring over lists of Liverpool greats and just kind of, and it just, he's the one I landed on. And Hippier was, I mean, I remember watching Hippier with the Steven Gerrard teams and just being like, he's very good. I went with Carragher just because of the heart, soul. Like, I mean, he's body on the line kind of guy. So that's why I picked him. But I struggled with Hippier and Carragher a lot.
Okay. Well, I guess we come to midfield now, and the first position, the right side midfield, what I've done is I've moved a player there that I think could play in that position, but he was more of an attacking striker when he played for Liverpool, and that would be Kevin Keegan.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Keegan was a great player, but he was one of these lads who he just worked so hard and made himself. There were maybe more talented players around in that era. And subsequent to him playing at Anfield, he went on to be European Footballer of the Year, I believe, twice. And that's just testament to how much work that he put into his game. He was just energy. He could get forward. He could set goals up. He could score. And I think he could play on the right side midfield.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of the park, on the left side, would be somebody who would be in a lot of people's all-time Liverpool teams, and that's John Barnes.
Yeah.
And he was a brilliant player, as we all know. He just had that ability to go past players as though they weren't there, and scored some fantastic goals in the time he was at Anfield. Later on, they kind of moved him more in the Premiership era. After some injuries, they moved him into more of a playmaking midfield role because he had vision.
Mm-hmm.
But Barnes was a fantastic player. And in the middle, I'm coming back. I've got a couple more Scottish players. Liverpool have had huge connections with Scotland through their history, even before my time, because in their very, very first game ever in 1892, the whole team was Scottish.
Unreal.
Every player on the team was Scottish. And I have it as a defensive player, a defensive midfielder, and he was physical, but he also had vision, and that would be Graham Souness. Mm-hmm. And as an attacking midfielder, and he actually started off his career at Liverpool as a centre forward, even though he was only 5'7" tall. And that's a fellow called Ian St. John.
Yes, we mentioned St. John previous.
He was probably the first Liverpool player that I ever kind of, to some degree, idolized.
Mm-hmm.
There was just something about St. John, and he was small, but he was fantastic in the air. He just had the timing and the spring, and he scored quite a few goals in the air. And then as we got later into the 60s, he was almost a forerunner of the centre forward that drops back into midfield, a bit like you see Harry Kane do now.
Right.
And then he would play passes, which is why I've got him in the midfield, because he had vision. He had tremendous vision, and he could kind of slip these little through balls to Roger Hunt, which is a player that I'll mention in a minute. And Ian St. John was a great player. He was a great player. He went on to become a TV personality after he retired, and he was just a great guy. You know, I got to meet him once. And so they would be my two central players, and edging two players out. One would be the Dane Jan Molby, who I guess would compete with Graham Souness for that, I don't know, almost like a number 6 role, holding midfielder, great vision. And then the other fellow was Steve McMahon, who actually started his career at Everton. Liverpool tried to sign him, and Everton don't like to sell players to Liverpool. So he went down to Aston Villa for a couple of years before he came back to Anfield. And he was a hard player. By that, I mean he was very physical, but he was also great on the ball, tremendous work rate, England international, and they would be my backups for Souness and St. John in the midfield.
Okay, so we got Keegan, Souness,
St. John, and Barnes.
Yeah. So with mine, I went with 3 midfielders, and Steven Gerrard obviously is, one of all the lists I looked at was between Steven Gerrard and King Kenny being the, greatest Liverpool players ever. It was 1 and 2, flip them around. It was always them two, like being in the top 2. And Steven Gerrard was one of my favorite players to watch. And it's very interesting when you hear people talk about him and how good he was, and there's people that compared him to Manchester United's, he's a Scottish guy too. What's his name? The redhead, what's his name, coach? For United? Scholesy. Paul Scholes.
Oh, Peter Scholes, yeah.
He's not Scottish, he's British. He's English.
Yeah.
But the things that, like, they would, say, who would you rather have? And, like, a lot of people, even Scholes, he said, like, what Gerrard did for Liverpool, I could have never done. He put that team on his back season after season after season. Steven Gerrard could do it all. He was physical. He could tackle. He could pass. He could, long-range shots. He could get in the box for headers. He could literally do it all. Free kicks. It was unbelievable to watch him. It was such a joy knowing that you have that guy on your team, that even if the rest of the team isn't up to that standard, that guy can win you a game. He's a classic match winner, game changer. Loved watching him play. He's my favorite player of all time of Liverpool. Probably a lot of people my age and Premier League age people would probably say the same thing. And Coach, I'm sure you think the world of him as well.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely.
The next two were interesting. So I started thinking back, who are some good midfielders, and the list kind of came down to Luis Garcia, Dieter Hamann, Coutinho, Javier Mascherano, even though he wasn't with us that long, Xabi Alonso, and Steve McMenamin. And I went back and just kind of viewed Steve McMenamin and some of his videos and kind of some of his highlights. And I quickly remembered how good he was. He was one of the first guys kind of to go over to Real Madrid. Not the only guy, but one of the first few English guys that started making the moves to these bigger teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid. And he is great dribbler, great one-on-one, great finisher, very, very dynamic. I would almost call him like a Stevie G, very, very light, like a light Stevie G, but down a couple notches. He didn't have the full range of game that Steven Gerrard had, but from an offensive standpoint, he could play. And then I really struggled with who would be the other midfielder, and I went back and forth, and I landed on Alonso. I think he would be a perfect 6 in this system, single pivot with Gerrard and McMenamin ahead of him, knowing that Steven G can come back and cover if needed as well. Coutinho, he's kind of lost in history a little bit because we sold him and we kind of got better because we got Alisson and Virgil, and the team kind of gelled and came together. And there's news from Klopp telling him, if you stay here, they'll build a statue for you, like we'll win here. And he just wanted to go to Barcelona, and unfortunately for him, everything kind of went sideways after that. But watching him, and as he grew with his partnership with Firmino and Mane and Salah, it was really special to watch those guys play. But so Alonso, Gerrard, and McMenamin and also Mascherano. The thing is about Mascherano is I think he played better at Barcelona than he did at Liverpool, even though he was very good at Liverpool. So that's where I kind of said, you know what? I don't think he is in this group. Coach, what are your thoughts on those?
From this era, actually, I picked 3 players that played together, and I'll come on to that in a second. Some of the ones that I would consider as backups, well, first of all, Steve McManaman, who you mentioned, and he was more of a wide player, wide midfielder, wide winger almost, and he had great ability to go past players. Another fellow that was very, very smooth on the ball, and then he was very successful when he moved to Real Madrid as well, so that shows his quality. And you've got another player that I would kind of rate similar to him in the Czech player, Patrik Berger. Fantastic left foot, quality player, very, very strong in his time at Anfield. Didi Hamann, German international, played in the World Cup final back in 2002. Very strong defensive midfielder. Made the difference when he came on in the Istanbul Champions League final. And just played very simple, but a presence in central midfield. And so I think that they would be some of the ones from the Premier League era that I would consider. But I actually went for the three lads that played in the 2008-2009 season, which is Mascherano, Alonso, and Gerrard. And I think that team was very, very strong. I think it was the best team in England that year, and they'd have won the league, but they just lacked a little bit of depth. And they had injuries to Gerrard and Torres, which kept them out for a lot of games, and they just didn't have the depth. So they ended up drawing quite a few games, and that gave Manchester United the edge that season. Liverpool beat them twice, the memorable 4-1 game at Old Trafford being won. But I just thought it was a very well-balanced midfield. And one thing that I've always speculated about was maybe putting those three into the Jurgen Klopp team when they were at their ultimate best, where they were strong at the back, strong up front, and they had a very workman-like midfield. And you think about it, gosh, just imagine if they'd have had players like Mascherano, Alonso, and Gerrard, who had some of the same qualities, but maybe had a little more to their game than Henderson and Wijnaldum and company. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just the way that I see it. So I would pick Mascherano, Alonso, and Gerrard in a midfield three from the Premier League era. Coming on to the forwards, as I say, I picked a 4-4-2. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be two guys that played together and had a brilliant partnership for Liverpool. And they edged out three guys that I would consider for the team. The first being Roger Hunt, who was on the England team that won the World Cup in 1966. And Roger Hunt was kind of the classic poacher of that era. He would be in the box, and basically his job was just to score. I mean, I think he was a decent player and everything, but he would just be in the box, the ball would fall loose, and if Hunt got on it, you knew that they had a chance of scoring. You know, he was that kind of player. Then there's Steve Highway from the 70s, who was more of a winger, but again, a very good attacking player who had a long period playing for the club. Weighed in with a few vital goals, made many more, very fast. And the final one that I considered was Peter Beardsley, who was in the late 80s. He was on the England team in 86 that played in Mexico and subsequently went to Anfield. He was a very good striker, very, very busy, good on the ball, and he scored his fair share of goals. But the two that I've gone for, and if you know the history of Liverpool Football Club, I don't suppose it's a great surprise, are Ian Rush and Kenny Dalglish. And Rush was a thoroughbred. He was just fast. He could use both feet. He scored a few in the air, but actually, even though he was tall, he didn't score many in the air. He was more of kind of a breakaway type forward. He was a scourge for Everton. He tortured Everton over the years. There's no question of that. And he had a great partnership with Dalglish. Kenny Dalglish was signed by Liverpool when Keegan moved to Hamburg. And everyone was kind of down about Keegan leaving. But they soon kind of changed their tune once Kenny Dalglish came into the team. And he was a different style to Keegan, in as much as he was very good at taking the ball to feet. He wasn't a big lad, but he was low center of gravity, very strong on the ball, could protect it, could turn, scored some great goals. and set up Rush and many, many other Liverpool players during his time playing, before obviously going on to manage the team. So my two strikers, Ian Rush and Kenny Dalglish, complete the 11.
As you were saying the people you considered, I said, no way, he's going to leave out Ian Rush and King Kenny.
No way am I leaving out.
Yeah. All right, so the forward line, I mean, during the Premier League era, we've had some absolute studs for a forward line. We have Robbie Fowler, we have Fernando Torres, we have Michael Owen, Luis Suarez, Mo Salah, Mane, Firmino. I mean, it's a long list. And Mo Salah is a given, I think, with his left foot being unique. He's very quick. I mean, that first season, he was gangbusters here, and he's had a great, great career at Liverpool. And, if he stays on or he moves on, he'll always be known as the Egyptian king here at Liverpool and at Anfield. And I could not move from him. There was no way I could move from him. The other four that was tough, but Luis Suarez, when he was on, and the transfer window that he came in was when they sold Torres to Chelsea, and they bought Andy Carroll, who was supposed to be the guy to replace Torres, and Luis Suarez from Ajax. And Suarez, within a year or two, was clearly the better player. And although Carroll suffered with some injuries and he had some good moments, but Suarez just grew and blossomed, and, we know his antics and the biting and all that, nonsense. But as a pure footballer, he gave you a chance. He was another match winner kind of guy, and I really, really loved watching him play. So Mo Salah would be on the left-hand side, Luis Suarez down the middle, because Luis Suarez also is a playmaker. He's not only a goal scorer, he is a playmaker. He could drop in kind of like Firmino would and make things happen. And on the right-hand side, I went with Michael Owen. And the reason I went with Michael Owen is I remember how excited I was when I first saw him play and how fast he was, and how people looked like they were in slow motion running with him. I remember the goal he scored in the World Cup, I think against Argentina. He just waltzed around. The guys literally could not move. I mean, their feet were planted. They didn't know what to do, and he just waltzed around them. And so that particular image is set so deep in my mind, because I remember seeing it live, and then I just remember watching him play and just thinking, like, holy cow, this guy is so fast and a great goal scorer because of, I think his speed obviously had a lot to do with it. And then he went on and played on, I think he played at Real Madrid too as well, right, Coach? Yeah. So he's another one that moved on there, and unfortunately, he did not play for Manchester United as well. But that's another guy that kind of riddled with injuries towards the mid to end of his career. But man, coming out the gate, he was unbelievable. And it's really hard leaving Robbie Fowler out, because talk about a poacher, talk about a guy that you want the ball at his feet in the box. It was really hard. But Suarez, he was really special. Luis Suarez was really special when he was on his game. It was, I remember him against what was the team he tortured? Norwich City. It was a guaranteed hat trick against that team, and unbelievable goals, volleys from 40 yards, little chips over defenders, and then drives it into the net. And just There's one where he nutmegged a guy and then curled one in without taking another touch. There's so many unbelievable goals from Luis Suarez, and the biting incident, the first one I believe against, was it John Terry? I think it was John Terry, the first one, and then the second one in the World Cup against an Italian defender. Even I was resigned at saying, okay, it's time to move on, and Barcelona want him anyway, so let's go ahead and move him. But that he was super special. I mean, Mo Salah, I could talk for an hour about Mo Salah, and I'm not going to, because a lot of people who are probably listening are that's the recency bias that I was kind of talking about, that I was really struggling with. But Mo Salah was one that I'm not going to kind of go too deep into. We know how much he's meant to the club. We know the incredible goals he scored, and the kind of player he was. But Suarez, Owen, and Mo Salah.
Okay. I mean, there are an absolute embarrassment of riches that Liverpool have had up front during the Premier League era. I mean, under Jurgen Klopp, you had the classic front three of Salah, Firmino, and Mane, and they could all stake a claim for an all-time team.
Yeah.
The only one that I would pick is Salah, and it's purely because of the amount of goals that he scored.
Yeah.
And you can even analyze it further and say some of them were incredible. So I would put him on one side. Now you've got Robbie Fowler and you've got Michael Owen, who both came through the academy. They both played together for a while. Very, very different style players, and everyone that's associated with the club say that Robbie Fowler's the best finisher that Liverpool have ever had. That's any era. And that's over Rush, Dalglish, Hunt, anyone. So, I'm not going to argue with that. He could be clinical. And then you had Michael Owen, whose blistering pace put him in positions. And I think the classic game for him was the 2001 Cup final where he won it single-handedly in the last 10 minutes against Arsenal. The second goal in particular is a remarkable goal, I think. So they could be considered, but at the end of the day, I think you've got to look at two players that at their absolute best were unplayable. And the first one is Fernando Torres. And I think that we had the benefit of Torres at his peak. Somehow he fitted into that team. Somehow Rafael Benitez could get the best out of him, because when he moved on to Chelsea, he had his moments, but he was never anywhere near the player he was at Liverpool. And he was just a fantastic player. Another one that scores all these goals, a remarkable one against Blackburn that I can remember, where he just kind of pivots and just drills it into the opposite corner.
The volley, right?
I'm not sure if it's a volley or a half volley, but the ball's played through to him. He's on the corner of the box, and he seems to be moving slightly away from the goal, and he just kind of pivots and hooks the ball into the other corner. Great goal. And then there's Luis Suarez, and you can't leave Suarez out. I have a feeling that even though Liverpool had that great front three under Jurgen Klopp that I mentioned earlier, Salah, Firmino, and Mane, I think if Suarez had been there, that he'd have taken the place of any of them. He was just that good. And obviously he was kind of I think he'd been a street player initially when he was in Uruguay, and he'd get a little too frisky, as you noted. But there was just something about him. He was unpredictable, never say die. And so a front three of Salah, Torres, and Suarez. What a forward line.
That's terrifying.
Can all score goals. They've got pace. Yeah, they've just got qualities that you can't imagine. Brilliant players.
Yeah, the Torres one I struggled with, but Owen again, just when he burst on the scene, it was so exciting. I mean, Liverpool graduate from the academy. There was a lot of excitement that he generated. Just he's a good looking guy. He's fast. There was like a lot of stuff, like cool stuff happening for him. Like I was just very, very impressed with him. And but this is my list, and I would have no problem substituting some of the other players. I think Gerrard is the only one that you cannot move at all. Coach, what I want to kind of throw at you here is, what about an all-time team, not a era breaker? And I'm gonna we can talk through this. I know I didn't kind of prep you for this, but while we're doing this,
I have
one.
You do? I have one, actually.
Okay, right.
That's it. So, do you have one?
The problem with me, Coach, is I don't know. I know Stevie Nichol. I know Hansen. I know, just from when we did some of the old games, and when you talked about memory, going down memory lane with your experiences at Anfield. That's the first time I knew who a lot of these players were, but the first time actually being exposed to them. And when we did the Champions League exercise, a lot of those highlights of the Champions League finals of Liverpool won, in their earlier years, were actually available. So that's the footage that I got to see of these guys. So I don't think I can actually come up with something that I would be confident and stamping my name on it. But I know you have, these multiple eras, and you are, you're a coach. You evaluate players constantly, and you understand these eras and probably the differences in them and how they would fit in together. So I leave the floor to you, my man.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at it now, just picking. Well, how many have kind of pre-Premier League and how many aren't?
Before you do, my manager Jurgen Klopp. Although I considered Houllier, my bench would be Fowler, Torres, Hipia, John Onarise, Pepe Reina, Luis Garcia, and Dieter Hamann. And I probably would replace Luis Garcia with Mascherano. But those that would be my bench. And I mean, what a team! Good God.
Yeah. We've been very fortunate at Liverpool to have so many good players through the years. So for an all-time team, I mean, before I talk about that, you mentioned manager. In a funny way, I think you've got to give it to Bill Shankly, because really he's the father of the modern Liverpool Football Club. I mean, Liverpool had success prior to his arrival, but had been in the doldrums for a while. I believe prior to him coming, they'd won the championship 5 times, and I think Arsenal had won it the most, either 6 or 7 times, and maybe Everton had won it 6 or 7 times. So Liverpool, even though they'd never won the FA Cup at that time, had always been successful to a degree. But in those days, it was more of a revolving door. Who were champions of England? It kind of changed after 1961 when they abolished the maximum wage, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but anyway. So the all-time team, goalkeeper, I would have Ray Clemence with Alisson on the bench. So that's the one thing that I would do. I would go with Mark Lawrenson, right side defence, even though he wasn't a fullback, just because he was such a good player. He was a fantastic player. And my 2 central defenders would be Van Dijk and Alan Hansen. And again, you've got a beautiful balance. You've got the big dominating defender in Virgil van Dijk, and then the silky smooth operator in Alan Hansen alongside him. Left back was between 2 Scots, and I would just edge Robertson over Stevie Nichol. I'd have Stevie Nichol down on the bench. And then the backup defender I would have in the middle would be Sami Hyypiä, who I feel was a very good centre-half, dominant, quiet leader, scored a few goals as well, coming up to join the attack from free kicks and what have you. So he would be my backup to them. Now, the midfield three, I would...
you did say Robertson on the left, right? Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Robertson on the left. Nichol would be the backup on the bench. The midfield three, I'm going to go from two from the Benitez era. Steven Gerrard, who, as you say, carried the team at times. And he probably scored the greatest goal of my era supporting Liverpool. And that was the West Ham final when he scored that goal in a dying moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an incredible goal and also the significance of it. So I would have him and I would have Xabi Alonso alongside him. And taking the role of Javier Mascherano, I would have, from the 70s into the early 80s, Graham Suarez. Because he was physical, he was strong. As I said earlier, he had vision. And he's more of a goal threat than Mascherano. Mascherano, the biggest limitation from him, he was a very good defensive midfielder, but he was rarely going to get forward and score. Suarez could get forward and score as well. And the front three, I've gone for Dalglish and Rush. You just can't keep them out. And I've gone for Suarez. I just think Suarez, even though he was only there for 3 years, was just a phenomenal player. So your front three would be Dalglish, Rush, Suarez. Your backups on the bench in midfield would be Keegan and Barnes. And then your strikers would be... it's hard to leave out Michael Owen or Robbie Fowler, Fernando Torres, like those players. But I think you've got to give it to Roger Hunt and Mohamed Salah. I think I'd go for those. So, yeah, that's a pretty strong team. And I think fans always like to put together things like their all-time teams. And it's been fun. It's been fun doing it.
Yeah, it really is. And, I did a lot of research. I kind of finalized my list this morning, but I'm gonna do a lot of more YouTubing tonight. I think my wife is out to dinner with some friends, so I think I'm going to after I put my daughter to bed, just get on YouTube and watch all these because, man, there's so many goals. You mentioned one thing when you were talking about Fernando Torres and the goal against Blackburn. The one I remember, I think, was his first one against Chelsea when he danced.
Oh yeah.
Terry. And just slotted it as he was sliding to the ground to the opposite post. And I believe Peter Cech was in goal too. It was no slouch. So, man, we talk about the club, coach, and we talk about the stadium and, the songs and the fans and You'll Never Walk Alone. And then you go down this list of just unbelievable players, we are extremely lucky to have, to be fans of a club that has so much history, so much belief in itself, so many incredible players. I mean, this really highlighted how many amazing players we've had. To me, I mean, the forward line is just outrageous. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. Liverpool. Yeah, I'll have to talk sometime about how successful they've been in my lifetime. I know they've had periods. Everyone made a big fuss about that they didn't win the league for 30 years and things like that. But Liverpool's always been a club that's been in contention. Yeah. And a couple of years back, I worked out solely in the English game which team has been the most successful if you measure is going to be trophies. And it is Liverpool, like they do edge out Manchester United. Those two are kind of well clear of everybody else. But I think more than that, and it's something that I've mentioned before on the podcast, is since I've supported them, which is more years than I'm prepared to relay, although somebody listening will definitely get a
Let them do the math,
that,
Coach. Let them do the math.
Yeah. They've never finished lower than 8th. And that's a phenomenal record because United have been down to the 2nd division, Spurs have been down to the 2nd division. They've certainly finished lower than 8th in the top division, as have Arsenal. And then really Chelsea and Manchester City have only kind of come to the fore during the money era when it became the big bucks and Abramovich kind of changed the scenery, as it were. So Liverpool have been incredibly consistent, even when they haven't been winning trophies. And I think that we're very fortunate to have a team like that.
Yeah. And Coach, I have you to thank for being a Liverpool fan from my playing days with you. And our shirts had the Liverpool crest on it and everything. So I remember very, very clearly. And it was easy to pick a team, very easy to pick a team.
Yeah, well, that is my missionary work, and I'm doing a camp this week in Lexington, and we do a little fun thing where the kids come out and tell jokes. So I ask them questions at the start, and then one of the questions I ask them is, "What is the best soccer club in the world, bar none?" And they know the answer now. They know the answer. So it's all good fun.
Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this. I know Coach and I enjoyed this. And we'll see you next time. What a fun episode. And we'll have more fun things, fun content for everybody as we continue to kind of edge towards the signing period and the beginning of the season. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye. Liverpool fans, thank you so much for listening to the Liverpool Reaction, an American LFC podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and would greatly appreciate your support. Please leave a 5-star review and feel free to email us at tlrlfcpodcast@gmail.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. Till next time.